Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Everything Co-op. This Thursday morning, it's sunny and cold in Washington, D.C. Our guest is in Chicago. Good morning, Dr. Stacey Sutton.
Good morning.
How's the weather like in Chicago?
It's chilly. It's quite chilly.
The few times I've been there in the winter, it was more than chilly. Okay.
Yeah, I'm being generous.
So I get it, and because you've been on the show before, and I thank you for coming on. And you work for the University of Illinois, Chicago. What is your role there? What do you do there?
I am an associate professor in the Department of Urban Planning and Policy. And so I teach and do research and advise students, undergraduate and graduate.
Do you like your work?
I do. I really do.
I taught 12 years in my career, and I loved it. It's always money was always the problem. Okay. So your work is at the intersection of urban planning and economic democracy. What drew you to cooperatives and the solidarity economics as tools for change?
I think for those who are familiar with urban planning is a field that is focused on kind of reforms. And within that field, there are folks that do community development, economic development, and environment, and so forth. And while that is all great, I realized is the reforms don't necessarily transform the system in the way that I think we need. So I started thinking beyond just how do we improve a number of jobs in the city, for instance, to thinking about how can we create economic democracy so the workers can actually control the conditions of work and do that more and more. So cooperatives, the solidarity economy became areas to think about actually transforming our cities.
Transforming our cities so that the workers in the city...
Yeah, so it's both about, I happen to focus on economic democracy, so the workers have more control, workers have better conditions, workers are both the workers and the owners. So a worker cooperative, the owners and the workers are the same people, which means they can control the conditions of their work and they can benefit from the surplus, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is just what we can also think about cooperative housing, and we can think about community stewarded land or neighborhood assets such that the community owns the assets in their neighborhood, whether it's the land or the commercial property. All of these are tools that allow for communities to have power. But they own both their labor and they own the assets in their neighborhoods.
All right. I love it. So how does your role at the university shape the kind of research and partnerships you pursue?
Well, I think as in the department, the department is very supportive of this work. I teach a graduate course on the solidarity economy this semester. I'm teaching another graduate course on solidarity economy, but we're focusing more on a workshop. So we're working with community organizations in Chicago and in Gary, Indiana, and helping them think about how to start a community land trust, for instance. So I'm able to expose more students to these practices, right? So the degree to which they may not want to start one of these, in a cooperative, but when they graduate and work within the city, let's say, they're more familiar with the tools. Others may want to start, so they're learning how to create the tools, how to assess these tools, how to implement. But I think more importantly, we're working with community groups that are trying to do that right now. And so we can use the resources of the university, both the human resources as well as other intellectual resources to assist these organizations.
How long have you been doing this work?
I've been at UIC for 10 years, and then prior to that, I was in New York City at Columbia for about 5 years, so I guess 15.
Okay. Have you seen much change, or many of these organizations get started, these co-ops or land trusts or housing co-ops?
Absolutely. I think this is slow work. So unlike the more conventional approach in which, kind of wealthy individuals go in and decide how to organize an enterprise or buy things up and make all the decisions. This is very much a bottom-up approach, and because it's economic democracy, meaning that all of the people participating in it have voice in decision making, right? So that just takes more time, but it's purposeful and it's deliberate. And so I have seen quite a number of co-ops get started. In Chicago, there are new co-ops, there are new community land trusts, we have new community investment vehicles in which community members own the commercial spaces in their community. So yeah, we've seen this across the country as well.
So I guess you feel really good about your work if you can help spark these businesses.
I think I do feel good about my work, but I also feel like there's so much need that the current system that we're operating in, the current system of racial capitalism, is so dynamic that each new enterprise, each new co-op that we start, whether it's a land project or an enterprise, a business, it's wonderful, it's needed, but it always feels like a drop in the bucket given what we're up against. So yes, I feel good about my work, but also realize the magnitude of work that needs to be done.
So when people hear solidarity economy, what do they most often misunderstand about this word?
Misunderstand.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think I think most people think of mutual aid, and which mutual aid is part of the solidarity economy, but it is not the entirety of the solidarity economy, right? There are a myriad of practices, different types of co-ops, producer co-ops, worker co-ops, limited equity housing co-ops, non-extractive finance. I mean, there are many what we call practices that people don't realize are part of solidarity economy, but they also misunderstand the possibility for this. I think a lot of people don't fully believe that workers can own the business and the business can be profitable and it can be in a community and operate efficiently and effectively, and the workers can have power, right? So they don't understand, I think it's more that they don't believe that these projects are scalable. So you might have one or two, but they don't believe that we could have worker-owned cooperatives and own community land and think about cooperative housing, right? In terms of how they think about all these systems integrating.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people perhaps they haven't thought about it, right? How they saw this broader ecosystem that if it manifested in the way that we imagined, that it could have be part of transformative change.
So you've talked about cooperative cities. You're talking about this transformational change. What distinguishes a cooperative city from a city that simply hosts co-ops?
Well, that's a question. I think so. When I wrote about cooperative cities, I was looking at cities that actually support. They have elements of support for worker cooperatives, right? And in some cities, it's like legislative support. They've enacted policies or their regulations, or they've some type of ordinance or something that really allows for worker cooperatives to operate. And they've created tools within the city to support worker-owned cooperatives, which are different than just a small business tool, right? So they're acknowledging the difference. So there are some cities that do that. There are other cities that actually offer some money to cooperatives to start or sustain. And then there's another type of city, which I call these cultivator cities, that both acknowledge that there are cooperatives that are already starting, right? So there's a grassroots movement in terms of cooperatives. And then the city enters and creates an enabling environment so that they can flourish. That's through capital, it's through legislation, it's through land assembly, helping them get land. I mean, there are many things that a city can do to facilitate the development and sustainability of co-ops. So when cities don't do those things, co-ops can still start and sustain. It just becomes more challenging. So the ideal scenario is having the grassroots movement help to start these and sustain co-ops, but within the context of a city that is actually trying to support them. And that to me is a win-win. But there are many cities where the cities are just not even, they're either hostile or not thinking about worker cooperatives. But nevertheless, they flourish. But we are trying to create more cities that pass legislation or program or fund programs or initiatives that actually support these.
So how do punitive urban policies like fines, fees, zoning, policing undermine community wealth building efforts?
I would say that they undermine community broadly, right? And therefore they undermine community wealth building. Meaning, we did research on fines and fees and looking specifically at Chicago's red light and speed cameras, right? And I think we've all gotten tickets one way or the other, whether it's a parking ticket or a speeding ticket or a red light ticket. And I imagine we're all pretty upset when we get that ticket. But those of us that have the means, we pay the ticket. Those who don't have the means or have to wait until, the next month for them to be able to pay the ticket, they're accruing fees. So the most punitive part of many of these infractions are the fees that accumulate and the rate at which they accumulate. And so those become extracted, right? So if you're in a neighborhood in which it's a lower income neighborhood and there are a number of people that receive tickets and they can't pay them right away, they're now accruing all of these fees. And so it's hard to build wealth when the resources that you're bringing in are being extracted by the city. So I think it doesn't have to be this punitive, right? People say, oh, well, that's fair. Everybody's held accountable to the same rule. And when in fact, it's regressive. Because for me to pay a $100 ticket, it's very different than a very low income person paying a $100 ticket in terms of the share of our income. and then I can pay it and I receive no fees. They can't pay it and they just keep accumulating fees. So that is a regressive, punitive.
They double, sometimes triple. So yeah.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
So from your research, what sectors are most ripe for cooperative conversions right now?
I would say I think it's the sector. I mean, so I think there are many sectors, and it's hard to just think about a sector. But it's easy to, let's say we're talking about manufacturing. It's more the type of business in the sense of it might be a business that's doing well, but the owner wants to retire and there's no succession plan. So that can be in manufacturing of different things, of materials. It could be food manufacturing. It can be a hardware store. It could be a restaurant. So it's not a particular sector. It's really employers that are employing a number of workers that if they were to leave, people would lose their jobs, right? It could be a daycare center where you could go through that cultural change whereby the workers learn how to do all of the functions that are necessary to be owners. And there are organizations that help with that, right? So I've seen conversions in, many different sectors, as you say. I think right now, again, I don't want to point to any one sector. I really think it's whatever's the growing sector, whether it's in technologies or different platform co-ops or services, healthcare, I think all of them could be co-ops.
So I want to go now to your utopia project,
Yes.
Real Black Utopias. What does a Black-centered solidarity economy ecosystem actually look like on the ground?
Yeah. So people often, so this is a long-term research project, and it's called Building Real Black Utopias. And the point of it is to identify places across the country where, in Black communities, where we're seeing kind of a cross-section of solidarity economy practices. So if you can identify a worker-owned cooperative that is Black-led, Black-centered, it's highly likely you can identify a broader ecosystem in that community. And that's because these things don't just emerge by themselves. They're usually technical assistance providers, co-op incubators, perhaps the city is supporting in some way. There's some type of non-extractive finance available to them, right? So there are a confluence of things that constitute this ecosystem. All of them may not be hyper-local, but they're local enough such that these enterprises can access them. So when I look at communities, when you look at, in any of the communities that I've been studying, and they're probably 12, 13, 14, there is always some umbrella organization, at least once, often more, that's holding a lot of the work and creating an environment in which Black-centered cooperatives can start and be sustained, right? But it's not just worker cooperatives, and I think that's why I use the ecosystem term. It's the worker cooperatives coupled with, a land trust, along with some type of housing, a plan, or a actualization of kind of cooperative housing. Perhaps they have part of the decision-making model is an assembly model, like a people's assembly. Every place I've visited, it looks a little different. Mm-hmm. There are some commonalities across. So the reason I changed the title to Building Real Black Utopias, because it is an ongoing project. It's an ongoing practice. It's not that these are utopian in terms of they exist and these are the places that we all should move to. No, but they are places in which people have a vision for kind of radical change, and they also have a set of tactics and and ideally a strategy for moving in that direction for their community. And to me, that is a real Black utopia where you are both fighting some of the systems that are most oppressive, right? So you have groups that are fighting kind of both the state, the police state and surveillance and the anti-immigration, all of that, you have people fighting, but you also have people building cooperatives, building the alternative that communities need. Because I would argue that it's not sufficient to just fight. We need to fight. But if we don't have something to offer people, and not just offer and give them, but kind of educate people so that they can see the benefits of these other models and take those on and see that both it's possible and it's lucrative for them, then we just go back to this same old thing. So the point is to transform the system so you have to have alternatives to the current political economic system. So that to me is a Black utopia, a real Black utopia.
You said there are about 13 or 14 cities. Can you name a few of them?
Yeah, sure. I would say Jackson, Atlanta, New Orleans, Houston, Chicago, Boston, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Oakland, LA, DC, Baltimore. I don't know how many I've named, but those are definitely on my list.
What about New York City?
Yeah, that's interesting. So New York has a lot. At the time in which I was doing, and Detroit as well, right? In the time that I was starting the research, the Black community there wasn't as much coherence, right? They had a lot of support, I guess, within the city, the small business services. They also have a lot of support in terms of the infrastructure. And so New York is on there, but it's one of the cases I'm still trying to explore because I think it's stronger in the Latinx community but I could, things may have changed. And then I say Detroit with a question mark because there's a lot of amazing work happening on the ground in terms of food systems and the new food co-op. I didn't identify when I was looking worker cooperatives, Black-centered worker cooperatives. So that was a primary indicator for me in terms of selecting places. As I said, if you can identify a Black-led, Black-centered worker cooperative, you can be I feel quite confident that there's a broader ecosystem because those things don't emerge by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Dayton, Ohio is another one that I would say is built, a real Black utopia.
So what gives you hope right now in the cooperative and solidarity economy space?
Hope is one of those things. I say that with given the climate that we're in. I think this is the only thing that really gives me hope in this climate, right? That we are actually still doing this work despite the political conditions in which we're operating, despite the repressive kind of actions of the federal government, right? People have been doing this work before this administration. They've been doing this work for decades, actually. And I think it's been heightened over the last decade, but this is long work in many places. So the hope for me is that we know how to do the work in communities in a way which it's about building relationships. We know that over the last decade, we've been building some kind of infrastructure. We've been building even some capital in terms of non-extractive finance mechanisms that didn't exist 10 years ago. So that is where I see a bit of hope because the state is, quite oppressive right now and is trying to approach all both radical, transformative practice. But I think we can weather this through our relationships and through the building in our communities and not depending on the state. So in some regards, that cooperative cities logic, which was, well, the cities could do more for cooperatives. The fact that most cities have not could be seen as a benefit in that the cooperatives that emerge in lieu of state support are the ones that are going to be able to sustain themselves, given that the support is being extracted. But right now, it's not just like a city support that's being extracted. We're saying it's federal support, but also philanthropic support. So the attack is from multiple sides. But the organizations that we've been building, the businesses that we've been building, the land, they're resilient. So that's hope.
I know in Dr. Jessica Gordon Imhard's book, she says that it takes longer to build a co-op than a capitalistic model. Like you said, if they have the money and the land, they can just go ahead and get started. And there's one person normally making decisions. But you have a group of people making decisions in a co-op. It takes longer. Sometimes they don't have the resources, the law, and they have to get trained on how you make decisions together and all of that. But they last longer. Yeah, and that's one of the good things about a co-op.
That's right.
What's one policy change every city should adopt tomorrow, if not today?
Yeah, one policy change. Well, it might sound like I'm contradicting myself in the sense that, well, one thing I would say is cities, a major resource in cities is the land, right? And land, most cities own many parcels of land and buildings. Or if they're privately owned and they're just being held but underutilized, there should be policies whereby the city can take those back. And I would love to see mechanisms whereby the city, there's a land transfer, right, of both buildings and land to community organizations, community cooperative organizations, right? There are organizations that are starting land trusts, but it becomes very expensive to put land in trust, to purchase the land and put it in trust. Or there are owners that own those parcels and are not willing to sell. So I think cities could be far more proactive in assisting land trusts, community stewardship trusts, and so forth, with land assembly. That's a huge obstacle. It's everything from assembling the land to getting building permits and so forth. Cities are notoriously bad at that transfer of land and building. I think they could also facilitate access to capital better, right? They recognize, those that recognize cooperatives recognize that they operate differently. And during the pandemic, cities were able to get money to businesses. Prior to that, they would say, oh, no, we can't lend or just give grants. Cities implement. You can't give grants to businesses. Somehow, miraculously, they were able to do that during COVID. And now there's been retrenchment again. So I think cities could go back to that model of providing grants to cooperatives as they're starting or at certain stages of their development.
So, Dr. Sutton, I know you only had time for us for this half an hour, so I want to thank you first for being on. And when we come back from our break, I will be talking about Dr. King and some of the things that he did. We just celebrated King's birthday. So I really want to thank you for being on and for sharing. I have so many things I want to talk to you, but we're going to have to do it again.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. You have a wonderful day. And for everybody out there, please don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes, and the program is Everything Co-op. We've been on air now 12 plus years. And throughout all of that time, the National Cooperative Bank has been our main financial sponsor and cheerleader, if you will. They've just been there. They are a cooperative, and they are looking at how do you help people in terms of their business get loans, but in terms of society is how to take some of the money they make and put it back into society. So they put money back into this program so we can give you information about co-ops. NCB's mission is to support and be an advocate for America's cooperatives and their members, especially in low-income communities, by providing innovative financial and related services. And low-income communities, Black, Brown, Native American communities, also there are poor white communities, but in these, in Black and Brown Native communities, there's a bigger percentage of the population that are poor. And they're always looking for ways of improving. And just like Dr. Sutton just talked about, NCB can work in cities, work with different cooperative development centers to help create more co-ops, to help people create wealth. And so it's just been an absolute pleasure working with them on this project for 12 plus years. So what I said before we took the break was I'm going to come back and talk about Dr. King. We're in the middle between Dr. King's birthday, which was this past Monday, a celebration, and Black History Month, which is February. So I want us to remember Dr. King with honesty. He didn't get up and give a speech so that we could repeat his words once a year and then return to an economy that crushes people, just totally crush people. Take from folks. Take from the planet. Leave the planet worse off, leave people worse off. The capitalistic system is an extractive system. He was not only dreaming about racial integration, he was organizing for economic transformation. And that's what Dr. Sutton just talked about. How do you transform cities? How do you transform communities within those cities? And she was mainly talking about Black communities. Okay. What are the key pieces? And from the cooperative view, those key pieces, we call an ecosystem, was the co-ops that are in that particular city, and those organizations that help the co-op. Technical support, legal, financial, and the government can help, as Chicago put in $15 million. New York was $5 million a year for, I think, 5 years. So they can help with money, but they can also help with creating policy that helps transform the economy. King said plainly, we must recognize that we can't solve our problem now until there's radical redistribution of economic and political power. Now we get that power thing again, but both politically and economically. That wasn't a metaphor. That was an instruction. It's what we've got to do. So I want to talk about power today. Power. And my definition of power is to have the ability to think of something you want to do and then have the resources to get it done. Resources, ability, skills, whatever you want to accomplish, you have the resources to get that done. It's power. But I want to start with something small. I want to start with the pinky finger. So some of you may remember I'm 78 and I was in high school in the early 60s, 63, 62 through 65. And I would go to a church, in the basement of a church. We'd have meetings. We'd walk in Bluefield, West Virginia. There were sit-ins that the college students did at the local Kretzky's at 5 and 10 store, sitting at the counter. But what I liked most was at the end of the meeting, saying what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. We would come together. We stood in a circle, and we crossed our arms, connected. We didn't connect hand to hand. We connected pinky finger to pinky finger. And then we sang the song, "We Shall Overcome." This wasn't accidental, and it was not sentimental. It was preparation. Because the pinky is the weakest finger on the hand. It can't grip, strike. It can't carry weight all by itself. So we connected to somebody else's pinky. You could feel them breathing, and you could feel when they shift or when they were tired. And because you cross your arms and you're connecting your pinky fingers, you're shoulder to shoulder. You're touching shoulder to shoulder. And so you're connected to the people beside you, but you can also, because you're in a circle, look at everybody in the room. This wasn't just a ritual. This was political education. Because "We Shall Overcome" was not a solo song. It didn't say I. And King reminded us, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? Like right now. We shall overcome together, or not at all. So what we were practicing in that circle was Ubuntu. Ubuntu. Even, I didn't know that word then. I never heard that word then. Ubuntu comes from Southern Africa, from Zulu and related traditions. It's not a slogan. It's not a self-help idea. It is a way of being. A way of being. Ubuntu means I am because we are. I am because you are, and you are because I am. My humanity is bound up in your humanity. My freedom is incomplete if your freedom is denied. We are together. Ubuntu teaches that harm done to another diminishes the whole, and that dignity is not something you earn. It is something you protect together. You know, this is why Mandela, after 27 years in prison, could say that revenge would destroy the very future he was trying to build. Ubuntu did not erase the harm done to him. It gave him a moral framework that said, if I become what oppressed me, the community is lost. Dr. King shared the same moral grounding. He said, the ultimate weakness of violence is that it is a descending spiral, begetting the very thing it seeks to destroy. Ubuntu and the beloved community speak the same truth. You do not heal broken systems by reproducing their logic. We can't get wealth for black folk by doing to the masses what they have done to us. So Dr. King's beloved community was not poetry. It was architecture. He said true compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. True compassion. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. So we have all of these homeless people in D.C. and Los Angeles and New York and San Francisco. We can give them some money when they come up to your car or when you're walking. But the real compassion is to change the system. And again, that's what Dr. Stacey Sutton was talking about. She talked about cities. She called them real black utopias. Those cities that put together the ecosystem, the money, the lawyers, the law, technical support, training, which is critical, and the fifth principle of corporations. So the edifice that needs to be restructured is economics. And that restructuring is our unfinished business. That is where co-ops come into play. King was assassinating while supporting sanitation workers, workers demanding dignity, workers demanding collective power, workers demanding an economy that did not require humiliation to function. That's not coincidental. That is critical. It is central. Worker cooperatives sit directly inside that vision. Again, Dr. Stacey Sutton just talked about that in the first half hour. When the owners, when the people that work, the employees own the business, they have voice, which gives them dignity. They learn how to work together, this collective power. They learn that when there's surplus, they get to say what happens to that surplus, profits. Because worker co-ops begin with a radical moral assumption. The people who do the work should own the work. The people who create value should govern the enterprise. The people who bear the risk should have a real voice. This is Ubuntu made economic. That is the beloved community translated into structure. Black cooperative economics did not emerge from theory. It emerged from necessity. When banks refused us credit, when labor markets wouldn't give us jobs or gave us jobs that didn't pay us or didn't pay us well, when land was stolen, when wages were suppressed, people pooled what little they had, small contributions, shared labor, mutual aid, rotating credit, the banker ladies, pinky-sized investments, small investments. It wasn't because people lacked ambition, no, but because they understood something capitalism denies, that small, connected contributions can carry enormous weights. I mean, you see it in the churches. Talk about 10%, a small portion of what you make to tithe, to put in. And then collecting that money is where the power comes in. That's where the historically black colleges and universities mostly started, from churches, from putting in a little bit. It could have started with a junior high school or an elementary school and then evolved into a college or university. But worker co-ops are built on that same truth. That's the churches. Small, connected contributions can carry enormous weight. They're not economies of domination. They're economies of relationship, which is the main asset we have in the black community, is relationships. No one carries the enterprise alone. No one is disposable. No one is invisible. And governance matters. Ubuntu does not mean anything goes. It means responsibility is shared. Get that word, responsibility. In the values of cooperation, it is self-help first, self-responsibility. Responsibility is second. Then democracy, one member, one vote. Equality, equity, and solidarity. So your first six, self-help and self-responsibility are the first ones, and then you get to solidarity. And after solidarity are the ethical principles of honesty, openness, social responsibility, and caring for others. You care for the community. That's the social responsibility. You care for the planet. You care for each other. Responsibility is shared. Dr. King warned us, power without love is reckless and abusive. Power without love. And love without power is sentimental and anemic. You know, medical anemic is you don't have the power to create the red blood cells. Your system is weak. And what he's talking about is that worker cooperatives try to hold both of these things true. Power with accountability and love with structure. That's why cooperative governance emphasizes one member, one vote, honesty and openness, which is transparency, shared information, collective decision-making, correction without exile. If you do something wrong, you just correct it and learn from it. You don't have to kick somebody out. You know, just like those singing circles that we were in. If somebody's voice cracked while singing "Will You Overcome," like mine did, you didn't remove them. You leaned in. You held tighter. You sang louder. I sang loud, not necessarily on tune. And the feeling was so wonderful of us being together. So cooperative organizers don't reduce cooperatives to legal forms. Don't sell them as efficiency tools alone. Don't strip them of their moral roots. Remember the pinky. We come together. We come together with the smallest, weakest part of our finger. But even though we're working with the weakest part of the finger, when we come together and touch pinky to pinky, you get tremendous power. It also means that the weakest in the group, they're not kicked out because they're weak, don't have the money, don't have the skills. No, you lean in together, you work together, you learn together. So I had a professor on, a financial professor on the show, and we sat together at a breakfast, and he had said his view of co-ops are kumbaya. I don't know, in the 60s that was a big song. It was love, working together, working on, depending on each other, working with and depending on each other. And he had experienced co-ops that were more concerned about the people than efficiency. And that was his experience with co-ops. You gotta have both. And the co-op, the capitalistic system depends more on efficiency so they can make more profit to take to the stockholders. And they're not so concerned about people and caring for people. Kumbaya. Need both. And co-ops preach when you go to annual meetings, when you're helping each other. Without the margin, without the profit, without efficiencies, there's no mission. You can't get your mission of delivering whatever products and services that you have come together to do if you don't have efficiencies. You can't realize the values, self-help, self-responsibility, equality, democracy, equity, solidarity, and honesty, openness, social responsibility, and caring for others. You can't do these things without the love that Dr. King talked about. You have to care for each other and for our planet. So you design systems that protect the weakest member. You share information as a matter of dignity. Everybody has a voice and encouraged to use that voice. That's where the dignity comes in. Dame Pauline Green on the show, at the time she was the president of the International Cooperative Alliance. And she said co-ops help people to come out of poverty with dignity. That dignity is having voice. The fifth principle of cooperation is education, training, and information. Is what I found out about co-ops and caused me to love them is that training happens. They happen all the time. And we mentioned that earlier in Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhard's book, Collective Courage. She talks about training before the co-op gets started and while the co-op is operating. It consistently and continually training. Treat governance as collective care, not administrative burden. Correct with relationships, not disposing of somebody. Build enterprises that people can stay whole inside. You don't tear anybody down. Dr. King reminded us, human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. Worker co-ops are not shortcuts, okay? You're still going to have the sacrifice, the suffering, and the struggle, but they are commitments, and the results are awesome. Ubuntu demands that we ask every day, does this decision strengthen the circle? Does this structure honor shared humanity? Does this economy help us to remain human to one another? The beloved community is unfinished work. We've got to create more of these co-ops in more cities and get cities to create policies, provide monies, government, and then we come together and share whatever we have in terms of money and our knowledge. The beloved community is unfinished work, and cooperative economics is one way we continue it. We share risk. We share reward. We govern ourselves. And as the pinky finger, we don't let go. We hold on. And this is how we overcome. We overcome by working together. Listen, if you want to start a co-op, you can get to the Federation of Worker Co-ops, the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. Just Google them for worker co-ops. In a lot of cities, areas, there's cooperative development centers. You can Google in your city to see if there's a cooperative organization. As Dr. Sutton says, there's normally one in her utopia cities, Black utopia cities. There are people out there to help, give you the technical support you need, give you education you need, help you with the funding and the finances. We can create the beloved community that Dr. King talked about. It's on us. Let's do it. Everybody out there, please have a wonderful week. Please work together, pinky finger to pinky finger, and we'll see you next Thursday.